All right, our next panel is going to be moderated by David Waite. David is a partner at Cox Castle, and he has a great lineup of panelists with him. So please join me in welcoming our next panel. Thank you.
So having done this before, I think being a late panel in the afternoon is really tough because I'm sort of between you and cocktails. Being the late panel in the afternoon following Rick Caruso and Lou Horn is, Daniel and Emily, we got to talk about that, okay, for next time. Anyway, I'm really pleased to be with you all this afternoon. I think we have a terrific panel, and we're going to have, I think, a great discussion. And I will say that, you know, as we get into this conversation, I would ask all of you to reflect a little bit on your remarks about some of the comments from Rick and Lou. This is a super challenging place for all of us to do the things that we do, yet we persevere. We get things done. We have projects that we're proud of. We work with amazingly talented people. We're making change. We're really doing our best work in spite of some really pretty substantial headwinds, right? And they just kind of keep coming at us day by day. So I would say as we get through the conversation this afternoon, I would welcome those perspectives as we get through it. So let me first start by just making some very brief introductions on our panel today. To my immediate left, and by the way, you have the bios in the materials, I want to welcome Kimberly Brown with Housing Impact Partners. Kimberly does amazing work in the workforce housing space, serving communities that are not underserved but often overlooked, I would say. And she does really outstanding work, and I'm really going to be really interested in hearing more from Kimberly about her work in the affordable housing space. Pastor Martin Porter, immediately to Kimberly's left, is doing outstanding work in an area that all of us are kind of curious about, which is the ED1 projects. Like, we know those are really getting entitled very quickly in a matter of 60 days or less, but how many of them are actually getting built? Well, the faith-based model, I think, is really impactful in terms of what we're going to hear about from Pastor Martin as he tells us about that work. To his left is our next speaker, who's going to have a little bit more, Ryan Burton with Lend-Lease, who's going to tell us a little bit more about mixed-use, infill, transit-oriented office, retail, residential, market-rate housing, sort of a project that I think many of us are sort of familiar with, and I think one that we should all celebrate because a very challenging project, but really promising in terms of what it's going to offer the community. And last but not least, on the very end is Joe Vargas with Wonderful Real Estate. A little bit of a different take in terms of product type. I think Joe's going to be telling us about the Bakersfield market, about logistics, about agricultural, and some of the other things that he's working on. So that's our panel. Lots of diversity, lots of interesting projects to talk about, and I think we're going to have a great conversation. So the overall theme for the panel is I really want to talk about real projects, real challenges, constraints, problem solving, workaround, and how these folks have been successful in getting their projects to market, particularly in uncertain markets. And so I'm going to ask each of you to do is to start off and just tell me a little bit about a project that's most important to you today that you're working on and why. I'm going to start with Kimberly, and then we'll work our way down.
Thank you, David. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be here. First of all, I'd just like to thank Daniel. My participation on this panel happened a couple weeks ago. He and I were having a spirited conversation around the surge in investment in historically underestimated communities. And thank you for using historically overlooked, those two words, not underrepresented. Please remember that. We're trying to change the narrative here. And so we were both sharing the communities that we come from. And so he goes, you know what, I want you on my panel. I want you to talk about some of the work. You're in the trenches, you're on the ground, you're doing the work. So my background's in brokerage and operations. I most recently rolled out of Cushman & Wakefield a couple years ago, was in this building as a matter of fact. I see a number of my colleagues here. And I am delighted to see you all. This is a little bit of a homecoming of sorts because I've spent the last close to 3 years in the housing ecosystem, which is vastly different than the CRE ecosystem, which is kind of fascinating to me, that they're two distinctly different networks. But nevertheless, Housing Impact Partners. I'm forward-facing, have been a leader. Many of you probably know me across various channels. But couple years ago, leading an organization here in Los Angeles called the African American Real Estate Professionals, working for Cushman and Wakefield. Clients, the pension funds, many of whom you saw earlier today, were starting to come to me and say, Kim, we're looking for groups on the ground to activate through. We're looking for groups on the ground to invest in particular markets in Los Angeles. Can you help? Can we talk? Absolutely, we can talk. So there became a fork in the road, so I parted ways with Cushman and Wakefield. I thought I was going to continue my brokerage work and partnering up with my brokerage colleagues, many of you in the room. Housing found me. Housing landed on me. Within 2 months of exiting from the corporate space, I get a phone call. Prominent folks in the city of Los Angeles said, Kim, it's time. It's time for you to activate. Cherie Franklin, my business partner here, is one of those people. We formed Housing Impact Partners in conjunction with a third partner who's an investment banker. His family started the first black bank in the city of Los Angeles. Cherie is a legacy developer. I was tickled when Rick mentioned that he served the last 3 mayors, she served the last 6, but we're not competing. So we uniquely come together and we're just uniquely positioned. So where I'm going with this is we see things through a vastly different lens. We are all from South LA. We are all activated on every level. I call it the P5, right? Instead of the public-private partnerships, we're going to throw in philanthropy, and I like some of the conversation that Rick talked about his philanthropic works, because that's important as it concerns housing as well. I like how that conversation ended around housing. The other piece, the vastly important piece that I'm going to talk about today, is around the people. There's a 6P pro forma, but I'm not going to talk about pro forma. Some of my other esteemed panelists may be talking about underwriting of deals. I'm going to talk about the people aspect, because that's a central part we're developing for people. So, did you ask me a question?
That's a great way to conclude the opening remark. So, Pastor Martin, tell us about your work. You know, thousands of units in development, and Rick mentioned on the last panel the challenge of the LIHTC bureaucracy and pre-development costs. Tell us about how you're working your way through it, because clearly you've been successful with a faith-based model.
Thank you very much. My name is Pastor Martin Porter. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. I wear 2 hats. One is I'm the founder and CEO of Logos Development. We're in faith-based, so sometimes people just assume, for example, that it's just all charity or all nonprofit based, but we are a for-profit developer with about the same unit count now as any kind of mid-size regional developer. The other hat that I wear, which is the hat that I am passionate about, is I'm a pastor in the African Methodist Episcopal denomination, which is the nation's oldest black denomination, the nation's oldest African American denomination. And those two converge around the idea of focusing on ideals and focusing on values. And that has been a sort of a secret sauce. One part of your question was, what's an important project we're working on now? And I think it would be helpful to hear of a specific. So we will be at 100% RTI permits on a 139-unit project, St. Rest Manchester project, at around September or so. Groundbreaking and construction will start in October of this year. And that's a fully privately funded deal from pre-development all the way through. And the way we've been able to move in this market to continue to welcome investment and be able to continue to attract investment and debt is by focusing on ideals and by focusing on values, and that's been a value proposition for us that separated us. The way that the economics work for our project is we have no land acquisition, and this is an important, how are we doing this? We have no land acquisition. These are joint ventures. We don't use LIHTC funding, so we don't trigger union, we don't trigger prevailing wage. We pay very well, but we don't trigger prevailing wage, amen? And so that's another part of it. We bring in the 501, our nonprofit partners, the church. So we bring them in the deal, and then we bring in another nonprofit for the covenant. So we have a nearly zero tax hit. We don't trigger prevailing wage, and we have no land acquisition. So as good as the private equity was in the last one, as sweet as that sounded, our model is pretty sweet even through inflation and through interest rates because of those three three aspects to it. And then again, the way we're able to attract capital, other than the fact that it stands alone on its own, this model, is we really lead with family and faith and heritage and honor within a very distinct communal focus. And that allows us not to fly over the flyover states, but to fly into the flyover states and attract private, largely Christian, largely faith-based capital that almost nobody in the room would have even been talking to yet. And that's been the last rounds of fundings that have been tremendously successful. So it's a pleasure to meet everybody. Thank you.
That's great. You had a quick comment?
Okay, just a really quick comment because I want to jump in because as you can imagine, Martin and I have already aligned, and so we're going to be talking about some 501c3 bond strategies as it relates to your projects because we have cracked the code.
No, we really are.
Our nonprofit partners, so we're excited.
I'm excited as well, Kim. Very
Great.
excited.
So we'll talk a little bit more about maybe SB4, YIGB, as it's been coined. Yes, in God's backyard. No zoning for church land, no CEQA compliance. But again, you do trigger prevailing wage. So we'll talk some more about that in a bit. I want to get to Ryan. Ryan, tell us about 3401 South La Cienega and that project, a phenomenal project.
Sure. So I'm Ryan Burton. I'm the development lead in Los Angeles for Lendlease. Lendlease is over a 60-year-old company headquartered in Australia. We're public in Australia and basically building gateway markets, creating great places. Our current project in Los Angeles is called Habitat. We just launched a teaser website for the residential component. Check out habitat-residences.com. Habitat's comprised of a 12-story, 260-unit apartment building, a 6-story, 250,000 square foot office building, and they're connected by an acre of open space right at the La Cienega Jefferson Metro stop. And we view it as the next great place in LA.
Office, new office, Culver City market. Just give us a little bit of the metrics on the office component of the mixed-use project.
Sure.
So everybody wants to know.
So my prior project, Ivy Station, one metro stop to the west, go back to 2018. That building we ended up leasing to HBO. We could have leased it 4 times over, and so the initial strategy when we acquired the land in 2020 was that by now, 5 years later, the office market would be coming back. And I think we heard today on a lot of the other panels, all the challenges we've encountered that a lot of them are LA specific. So some other submarkets within the US have come back, but LA, we're still patiently waiting. And we are starting to see activity actually. And so the play was really within LA, Culver City, Century City are those markets where office is strong. You have Apple, Amazon, HBO, the original content headquarters. They are going to start growing again, and then several other industries that are in that market.
Great. We'll drill down a little bit later as we get into the conversation. Thank you, Ryan. Joe, tell us about what's going on at Wonderful.
I'm Joe Vargas. I'm a 43-year veteran of the commercial real estate industry. I've held leadership positions at major brokerage companies, Cushman & Wakefield included. I'm now president of Wonderful Real Estate. I'm also, as an aside, a 2-time Olympian, and I had the great honor to participate in the 1984 games. And I don't know if all of you know this, but the revenue driven from the 84 games has sponsored and supported all of the Olympic sports for the last 41 years. If the games in 28 are half as successful as they were in 84, it'll be just a phenomenal performance. So look forward to those 28 games. Sponsor them vigorously and participate as much as you can. The project I work on is Wonderful Logistics Center. It's located in Bakersfield, Shafter, California. It's 1,700 acres. We're entitled for 25 million square feet. We have 15 million square feet of occupants, including many Fortune 500 companies, Walmart, Target, Amazon, Smuckers, and FedEx. We just completed a 1 million square foot spec building. These are all logistics distribution buildings. A 1 million square foot spec building. We have 1.5 million square feet in planning right now. We've also recently completed a career amenity center that consists of a 40,000 square foot office building, a 40,000 square foot training facility with classrooms, training facilities. We're in partnership with Bakersfield Community College where we provide training for not only the wonderful companies but also for our clients in the park. We're currently doing a 9-week course with Amazon. They're training their employees throughout the Pacific Southwest. This is funded and sponsored by the Resnicks at no cost to our clients. We've recently opened a container facility, a container depot that cuts the drayage costs. If any of you are familiar with drayage, it's transportation. Drayage costs from the ports of LA and Long Beach and Oakland into Shafter, California by 40%. In 2026, Q1 of 2026, we'll be opening our own intermodal rail facility. The container depot, the intermodal rail, and the Career Center are all privately funded by the Resnick family and Wonderful Real Estate.
Joe, can you just give us a little bit more of the metrics? I'm sure a lot of the audience is not necessarily familiar with the Bakersfield market as an inland port. People think of Bakersfield as sort of oil and gas and the old, and agriculture, I should also say. But obviously that market has changed dramatically in recent years. Can you tell us a little bit more about the demographics?
So to understand the Bakersfield market is to understand the Central Valley. The Central Valley is 300 miles long from Tejon Ranch up to Sacramento. It consists of 410 million square feet of industrial space, warehouse space. By comparison, the Inland Empire is 660 million square feet. So it's a very large market, although it's very, very horizontal. The market pretty much mirrors, from a logistics perspective, the market mirrors and competes with Phoenix, competes with the Inland Empire, Vegas to a lesser extent, and Reno.
Great, thank you. So I want to get back to housing in Los Angeles. Obviously, we have a number of wonderful incentives, largely driven by the state of California, by the way, not so much locally, but largely focused on affordable housing and creating more affordable housing and creating permit streamlining, finding lots of new ways to exempt projects from the California Environmental Quality Act. So this is sort of a joint question, I think, for Kimberly and Pastor, which is, how are you sort of seeing those tools playing out in terms of what you're doing relative to actually getting housing built? Not necessarily just entitled, but built.
Sure. So we have an interesting strategy. We started off with a ground up and an acquisition strategy initially when all the pension funds and institutions were calling, looking for investment. We have pivoted since, and so we've pivoted to the private market. And actually, what's happened for us has happened to us, thankfully. And so a lot of the ED1 projects that you heard about earlier have created a pipeline of opportunity for us to recapture housing and preserve affordability, which is our ethos. Like, we look at housing holistically. We can recapture new construction from a private developer. We're not, what, Sheree, less than $350 a door? Yeah, exactly. And so we can absolutely make it work. We also, and I neglected to mention earlier, part of our strategy is partnerships. So Housing Impact Partners is just not the 3 partners that I mentioned. We also have 6 nonprofit partners. 3 of those nonprofit partners we co-invest with: the Coalition for Responsible Community Development, the People Concerned, and Los Angeles Metropolitan Churches. So here's the rub. Through those nonprofit partners, we can, again, go in, recapture housing for preservation, new construction. We also serve the Mayor Bass's homeless and housing placement team, so we're aligning with her priorities. We also are representing HACLA and the VA. So the 2 populations that we're primarily focused on, which we have subsidies for through our nonprofit partners, are veterans. Every veteran in the city has a voucher. And we're also, little plug, we were also featured in the House Our Heroes campaign. We're a little bit of the poster child for that. But nevertheless, veterans and transition age youth. And so for those that don't know, transition age youth are the most at risk because that's the next population of homeless. Those are the 18 to 20. Those are the runaways in Hollywood. Those are the kids that are leaving the system. And so with that, when you talk about the regulatory environment, particularly here locally, through ED1, through our nonprofits, Measure ULA is a non-factor because we can also, so our sellers don't have to pay that tax. Many of our sellers, the vast majority, we're dealing with the principals, they're staying in the deals. They're co-investing alongside. They like our strategy that much. So anybody got merchant builds? We're here.
So the challenge with these projects historically has been for low-income housing tax credit deals, which you don't do, which I'm pleased because as much as 30 or 40% of the cost of those units at $600,000 or $700,000 per door goes to pre-development expenses. The capital stacks are complex. The regulatory environment is complex. I'm thrilled. So tell us about your capital source and funding. How are you actually funding these projects?
So we don't use, we don't trigger LIHTC either, and we build within the buy right envelope. So there are times that we don't maximize unit count. We build within the buy right envelope. We don't trigger LIHTC. And our capital stack's a pretty traditional for-profit capital stack funded by impact investors who have a double bottom line, which is to do good and to do well. But because they're focused on a different part of the investment market, when we lead with story and when we lead with ideals and when we lead with values, we have a better conversion rate to actually get them to invest. We're also having tremendous fortune now with private family foundations that are actually coming in at a 4% loan, for example, in pre-development, with a rollover into equity. So, our market sometimes is viewed as sort of niche, Kimberly, but I think you'd agree with me, actually, in this tick of the clock with all of the volatility, our niche is, I think, at least as conservative from the perspective of returns and at least as conservative, meaning at least as bulletproof and interesting sometimes from the perspective of returns and from the perspective of how debt's going to be taken out as, for example, market rate is. So our capital stack is a private capital stack. It's largely impact investors. We're having great conversations with private family foundations and public foundations, also out-of-state foundations. What we're really trying to lead with right now in the pre-development part of that capital stack is low-interest loans, impact loans, that can either be forgiven or converted into equity. And so we're trying to achieve a 7% yield on cost and a 20% return, and between hard and soft costs, trying to build for under $315,000 a door. Now, what that means is we're not being esoteric. We're not doing 2 bedrooms. We're not doing 2-bedroom lofts. We're not doing 3 bedrooms, for example. By and large, we're doing 1 and 2 bedrooms with some studios. One example where we are doing a 3-bedroom is because there's a particular grant writer that's coming in and providing almost all the investment right now in return for us doing a low to moderate 3-bedroom. So one of our most challenging projects we thought we'd have to punt on until this grant writer, this foundation came in and said, we will specifically fund your 2 and 3 bedrooms because we want to promote vets and families. So vets who have families. And so that project became a project that we thought we might have to go back to the church and have a really difficult conversation, is now a project requiring no outside investors.
That's great. So Ryan, tell us about the residential component for your project. I take it that was a density bonus project with some levels of affordability and some affordable commitment at certain levels. Tell us a little bit about the structure on that portion of the mixed-use project.
Yeah, I'll talk to that a little bit and then talk a little bit of how, because we are building market rate housing, there are many challenges in LA today to make that happen. And so, yes, that is something we did. So we pursued a state density bonus. So as part of that, we had 192 units, and we get a 35% bonus to go up to 260. In exchange for that, you have an 11% affordable component. And then talking to the local council district, they said, why can't you have 15%? And so we did have to, again, this is how you build in LA. We were able to manage and get up to 15% affordability. But you're still on the hook for things like a linkage fee for affordable housing that's $4 million. And we still had ULA come up. And then another piece of it is, to make the deal pencil, you have to sort of build the top of market. So we brought in Kelly Worsler as an interior designer. You may know her from Proper Hotels. So really high-end designer is designing to a condo spec. And so how do you manage that? Well, we ended up having 18 months of weekly meetings with her design team where we get a design, price it, doesn't work, go back to the drawing board. So over 18 months, developed a plan where we think we pulled off the Kelly Worsler magic, but on a top-of-market multifamily budget when it originally was a high-end hotel or high-end condo spec.
That's great. Joe, I got to ask you about housing in Bakersfield. I know it's not wonderful as a model, but just in terms of the folks that are working in your facilities and the ability to house them affordably in the community, what are you seeing in Bakersfield?
The affordability factor in Bakersfield is very, very good. Lennar's developed a very large project next to Wonderful Logistics Center. When it's fully completed, it'll have 7,000 single-family residences there. Average price of a home is about 1,800 square feet, is about $350,000. So it's very affordable. So a husband and wife that work in a warehouse and are making $25 an hour, they can afford a very, very nice home in this community.
That used to be LA a long time ago. So lots of headwinds. Like let's talk a little bit and just in turn. I want to just there's so many that we can mention. We've obviously we've got the fires, the rebuild, anticipated shortages with labor, materials, tariffs, city budget, a $1 billion shortfall here in Los Angeles that the city council is working its way through. Measure ULA, Ryan, you mentioned. Lending in capital markets, immigration policy. I mean, the list kind of goes on and on. It seems like there's something new every day. But at the same time, you all seem to be finding a way to thrive in an interesting and exciting way. So how do you I want to ask a question, how do you sort of address these challenges? I mean, when you get up every morning and you think about the stuff you got to deal with, how do you sort of work through the problems and what are the workarounds and what are the solutions? And I'm going to start, Joe, with you and work the way back. Because you may not be as impacted by some of this in Bakersfield, but I know writ large, you've got a lot of the same issues you're thinking about.
You're going to have to repeat that because I was falling asleep up here, to be honest with you.
Yeah, so I was talking about
really,
headwinds.
it's the end of the day here. People are waiting to go get the booze. This is a real estate crowd, right? So
headwinds. What are your headwinds out there?
Okay, so with our particular development, we don't have that many headwinds. Okay, we're totally compliant with AB 98, 100% compliant. We started with a blank slate at Wonderful Logistics Center, and so it's very contained in environment. And so with our project, we don't have financial headwinds. We build off our balance sheet. Okay, we don't have entitlement headwinds because we have entitlements. Okay. So we really aren't facing those hurdles or those headwinds in the market. What we are facing is convincing the occupier and user community that, from a logistics standpoint, that Bakersfield, California, the Central Valley is a place to be, and that's our headwind.
Yeah.
Understandable. Ryan, what about you? What are the?
I'll wake up now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
We have many headwinds on our project. So going down that list, we pretty much named quite a few.
Yeah.
And I could sort of talk all day about all the challenges and just getting fired up to build the project. We've been patiently waiting to unveil it, and this is what we do. We build great places. But yes, we acquired the site unentitled at the height of COVID, which we thought was sort of the worst of it. But then we had the inflation. We got our first pricing in summer of 2022, and the budget was 30% higher than what it was supposed to be when inflation was running like 10%. So you have a big problem, you pause the project, but we managed to get through it. We started construction summer of 23. The capital markets really shut down early 23 with bank failures. We still were able to get a loan closed last summer for $316 million, and we're plowing ahead despite all the challenges, and it's like one after another. So our latest challenge is we met with Rec and Parks 4 years ago at the beginning of our entitlements, proactively worked with them throughout the whole process where we built this well in excess of our requirement park for the community that's cost at least $10 million. And there was a $4 million in lieu fee if you build a park. They're supposed to, waive the fee. And so that was the plan for several years. And then about 18 months ago, we started hearing whispers about budget challenges, and they went dark on us and just made everything sort of impossible. But we managed to keep going, and they sort of strung us along. And then last fall, they said, oh, you're not building baseball fields and soccer fields. Sorry, we're not going to support your park. We're already under construction and committed. So those are the kind of things we have to deal with. But hey, we're still moving ahead. We got the project capitalized, and we're excited for what it's going to be.
That's great. That's the typical late hit on the Quimby fee, it sounds like. Okay, so Pastor, tell us about how do you deal with the challenges day by day? I mean, and what might still be the significant ones that you're still working your way around in terms of getting these things done?
Thank you for the question. Well, I'm a pastor, so you'll have to bear with me when I say that the way I deal with challenges is I turn to the big guy in the sky and lean on him and lean on the support from having that faith. Amen. And that allows me and allows my team to be relentless in the face of challenges. When you have faith and a purpose, a sense of purpose that's greater than the day-to-day grind, which we're all in real estate, so it's a day-to-day grind. But since I turned to a higher call and turned to a higher purpose, that's what allowed our team to do some really practical things. Personnel is policy. So I've doubled down in investing in my team's education. We've doubled down now in really trying to understand and use AI in our planning, in our permitting process. Some really proprietary stuff that we're working with our strategic partners. And we've doubled down on our relationships actually with the city and working with the mayor's office. I respect the prior panelists so much. However, as a pastor and in faith-based development, we work with the city. We work with the mayor's office. We work with the council office. We work with the planning department, and we bring in our partners, who are community-based. And so we try to drive a tremendous amount of goodwill to go a little faster in the planning department, to get a little more help with the city. At the end of the day, we're doing the same thing every other developer's doing. I think, though, we're really focused on the human aspect of this and on leveraging relationships and in being relentless when we're having conversations with investors, that you're not just investing in a 7% yield on cost and a 20% return. You're investing in a story, and you're investing in a dream. And that has made all the difference.
Great. So, and Kimberly, how about you? Any words of wisdom on this topic?
Stole all my thunder. However, I'll lead with two words, and I won't even need to elaborate: uncertainty and HUD. Okay, so those are two challenges. But if you had 3 other developers seated here, 3 private developers, they'd talk to you all day long about your list. We'd sit here and wait patiently, because we're going to get the phone call. We call it washing deals wash up on the shore. I got one in my inbox right now from today. And so we don't have to bear a lot of the pain that the developers, we're at the finish line, at the end line. We don't, from a capital markets standpoint, we do debt and equity deals, no LIHTC whatsoever. We're anti that. To Pastor's point, the alignment, the relationships, we don't see anything as any relationships as adversarial. I mean, we're aligned with the mayor's office. We're aligned with HACLA. We're aligned with our nonprofit partners in the nonprofit and the philanthropic community. So I'm not going to sit here and say it's not without its challenges. It is, and it's a slow process. Yeah. But we've also found we don't, to Martin's point, to Pastor's point, we don't have a shortage of investors because of our story, and we can perform, our deals can perform in double digits. But we also have a strategy around, because of our nonprofit partners and because of our alignment, and we've touched on this, is with 501c3 bonds, which are 100% financing, right? And so, yeah. So because of those strategies and innovation, and again, I'm going to credit my business partner because she is brilliant. If you've not met Cherie Franklin, we just all bring something very unique to the table. We're so solutions oriented. We're so efficient. we've learned from some of the mistakes of others, and so we move swiftly. So we don't necessarily see, we don't even, I mean, we see hurdles and we're going to jump over.
That's great. Okay, so I want to ask a couple of practical questions, sort of some techniques, if you will, and opportunities, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience for some questions. First, AI. AI is the topic, right? Yeah. We have to ask the AI question, sort of mandatory. Yeah. Are you using it? If so, how and in what, kind of in what area, and what do you sort of see as the future where you're going to be using it more? Ryan, I'll start with you.
Sure. So 10% of a construction budget is usually rework or changes in scope you have to do in the field. And so what we've seen on this project at Habitat is the BIM coordination, the coordination of the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, the level of detail you can get done now ahead of time. So when the trades are doing the work in the field, they're less prone to make mistakes or sort of hash it out in the field, all the clashes. So we've seen savings there. The other piece is safety. You know, safety is critical to any construction job. We have cameras with AI where they can target and identify safety challenges, and then there's a feedback loop to the team where they can actually see on video something that they did that was a potential to cause a safety issue, so they learn not to do it. And the third thing is operationally, with our property manager, we've learned that we only need half of an assistant manager, which in the past we needed a full person, so they can split on 2 projects because there's basically a bot that can follow up for a lot of the meetings to set up tours with potential residents, and also when you're already a resident to set up meetings. Just all of that follow up and setup, 90% of it can be handled by AI, and then there's a 10% piece when it gets escalated.
Fantastic. Joe, how are you seeing AI in the logistics space?
You know, AI is speed to market. Speed to market for us. You know, I'm the last person that should be talking about technology, but I recently used AI to do a comparative analysis of markets comparing Vegas, Inland Empire, Phoenix, and the Central Valley for buildings over 500,000 square foot. What are the vacancies? What are average lease rates? What's absorption? And it put out a report that I could present to my financial partner, Mr. Resnick, in a form that was presentable, and it literally spit it out in a minute. And so from my perspective, AI, if you're not using it, if someone like me can use it, and speed to market from financial analysis, research studies, construction analysis, it's an incredible tool. It's not the answer, it's a tool, and you have to be utilizing it today.
How about you, Pastor Martin? How are you using it?
So I won't name it's interesting because we're actually looking at Rick Caruso's platform as well now. So there's, you know, two unnamed platforms that basically have taken all of the zoning and ordinances, for example, from the city of LA and the city of San Diego.
That's the AWS.
What's that?
It's the AWS platform, Archibuild, I believe.
Then I'm thinking of 2 others even now. Yeah. So maybe there's multiples, which would make sense. The marketplace would, but what both of these are what both of these are working with us on to try to get a bid from them is to white glove and customize it to the fact that we deal with churches and denominational land. So in principle now, in 30 minutes, if we have the right inputs, we can punch out a report, which would include a zoning study and a massing study for property A, B, or C, or D that would sometimes take us months. And what we're doing at the same time is offshore. We have offshored our model. So we've offshored our model to India from the perspective of being able to create a dynamic pro forma, a dynamic economic analysis, and then when you pair it with this AI, it's pretty metabolic. It's like a something that takes you 4 to 5 months to analyze a property properly. Bringing the land use consultants, Craig Lawson, et cetera, is really going much faster. It has a real premium to white glove it. And I'll say it's $100,000 if we're going to get this whole thing white glove. But right now we're kind of renting the system, yeah. And we are seriously thinking about, purchasing this thing so that we can have a competitive advantage in the marketplace and be able to say to property A through Z, here's what you can probably do in your property, and these are the only 3 options you could probably do, for example, in the city of LA. So we're very forward on AI. And we're very forward on using offshoring to try to create a dynamic model that funders and investors can understand.
Kimberly, how about you? Any comments on AI?
Yeah, sure. No, absolutely. So where we're using AI, and really we perform our own model and we put our own packages together. And so where we're using AI is in sort of the narrative. Like I'll give you an example. We have one deal that we have a hotel that we're in play for. It's 200 units. And so it's got a pretty interesting strategy and it's historic. And so we can tap into AI and we're transforming it from just a sleepy hotel, kind of second generation family owned, families over it, to we're bringing in with our nonprofit partners, we're dedicating it to transaction age youth. We're going to have a hostel component, international students, the Olympics. There's so many aspects to this deal. AI certainly helps. Yeah. But I will caution, like there's some fact checking that's required because we're feeding AI and oftentimes some of the information is not 100% accurate. So we've spit out some reports before like, wait, I don't think that's right. So can't 100%, it still needs a human touch. Can't 100% rely on it, but it's certainly helping us avoid, it's keeping our costs down, that's for sure.
Great. Last question, adaptive reuse. Anybody looking at it seriously at this stage in terms of a new project, potential adaptive reuse of existing space? Ryan, anything? Lendlease looking at any projects?
We're waiting 12 to 24 months, and I guess my advice on it would be just to pick something up below replacement cost. And have a healthy contingency. My best example of it is we acquired a site in 2012, great real estate, corner of Hollywood and Vine in Hollywood, first high-rise in the 20s, but it was the lowest rent building. It had fallen into disrepair, and so we went back to restore it to its former glory. The budget, we ended up going 50% over because all the things we discovered once we opened up walls. But we doubled the rents. So you have good real estate and you create a great product, you can still make it a win with the value add adaptive reuse.
Great. Joe, any adaptive reuse in your space at this point?
Not in particular at the wonderful logistics center, but the wonderful company does own other real estate, and they're taking a look at a couple of office buildings, suburban office buildings that have potential for adaptive reuse to residential. But it's, it's all easier. Adaptive reuse, taking an office building into a residential, it's easier said than done.
Yeah. Pastor Martin, any opportunities on faith-based land for adaptive reuse that you've looked at?
We're doing one in Long Beach. It just ended up being sweet because it's so structurally sound. It wasn't an office building, it was an old school building, which actually really pairs over well into a conversion into affordable. But the bottom line is the structure just happened to be in great shape. Its basics were in great shape, less expensive than doing a ground up. And then the city, because it was under a certain unit count, the city's given us a great loan to be able to kind of make that happen still without triggering LIHTC. And so we got fortunate with this space in Long Beach.
Great. Okay. We're just about out of time. We do have time for maybe one or two questions. If anybody has a question, yes, right in front.
My name is Bob Ortiz. I'm with Chris Wakefield. Quick question. So Jamie Lee, they're converting all these buildings in Mid-Wilshire to residential. Carissa is talking about the cost. Everyone talks about the cost. Takes too long to get approval for new construction. Takes too long to get approval for adaptive reuse. So we hear the same thing, but no one's talking about how to solve the problem other than the Caruso who wants to be governor, which I don't know why he wants to be governor. He should be mayor. So my question is, how do you get around the additional rising costs and the length it takes to get approval?
So I'll just weigh in and then I'll open it up to the panel. So we've got the adaptive reuse ordinance in Los Angeles, which has been incorporated into the CHIP, right? So we now have, from a planning perspective, the tool, citywide, not just downtown, not just Koreatown. So that's great news from a planning perspective. We still have building and safety, right? Which is all the things that Jameson has figured their way around, right? Which is, concrete tension slabs and coring, and she's like, not a problem for us. But that's an older building. It may be a problem for a newer building. So perspectives on what you all are seeing in terms of how to actually make it work financially.
Yeah, I can't tell you how to make it work because we're not there. We're in a NOAA position and we're in a preservation strategy. I will tell you, I like the concept because it's regenerative. There's a concept of regenerative versus extractive real estate, and everything, our whole ethos is around regenerating. whatever we're touching. So our project, like the hotel project that I mentioned, is more of a transformation project versus an adaptive reuse project. But overarching, there's so much housing stock on the market now, and there's so many ED1, there's so much inventory out there that's sitting vacant right now. We mentioned the length of time, and hello, I remember you from Cushman Wakefield, by the way. You mentioned the length of time it takes to build. There's so many other projects that are underway now that can certainly put a big dent in the demand. A lot of private owners are we visited probably 500 vacant units. We took the city out, we take the mayor's office out every Wednesday for an entire year. I mean, within the span of a couple of weeks, we'd walk over 200 units vacant. We're walking over encampments going into vacant buildings. So I say that for context.
Yeah, and that's the voucher conversation, which is a whole separate panel, probably for another day. So any thoughts, though, on the adaptive reuse relative to city regulations and standards? Obviously, again, from a planning perspective in LA, we're good. It's about building in safety, and it's about plan check and cost.
I don't have too much to opine. Just our model doesn't include site acquisition and defers all tax issues. So that just makes us a little more, I just would say recession proof. Even we're not in a recession, but market frothy proof. But I don't have much to say about local adaptive reuse. Yeah.
Okay. Right.
It's just a real opportunity to create incentives, like reducing fees, not just expediting approvals, but reducing fees, reducing requirements, so you can lower that cost basis and make it feasible. And ideally, it doesn't have to be top of market rents. It can be somewhere in the middle.
Great. Okay, Emily, do we have time for one more question, or are you giving us the hook? No, she's giving us the hook. Big round of applause for the panel. Thank you all very much.